I've read all your website. I've watched a lot of your video content, and I feel like it's always weird when I do these because I always feel like I know the person before I've actually met them. So, but if we just start just kind of talking about, tell us about your business. So, what is your business? What's the work that you do? Maybe what's your specialty, your niche, or if you had to describe your business, what do you do for Mike Farrington?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I'm jealous of people who really have like just dire focus on whatever it is that they do or build or whatever. I've meandered a little bit more. For years and years and years, I just worked in construction, and typically the finer side of construction. I've done some occasional framing, although I'm too slow because I'm measuring too close and cutting angles too accurately. But I've done that all the way through interior finish work. That's what I did, as a teenager and in my early 20s. And somewhere in there, I kind of bumped into finish carpentry and then cabinetry, and it kind of expanded from there. And I did that till about 6 years ago. And then I started a YouTube channel. And if you start a YouTube channel and it takes off, it can be a good business in and of itself. Though I've not dedicated myself fully to that, it is a big part of my business now. From there, I have developed a couple of products, and I sell those via my YouTube channel. So currently today, I still do client work, a little less of it. I do make videos, typically of some of my more interesting client projects, and then some of the things that I have going on either in my shop or at my house. And then I sell a couple of woodworking products. So it's kind of a blend. It hasn't been a straight line. It's meandered a little bit. That keeps it interesting, but it makes it hard. It makes it challenging. So
Yeah, I think you do. I was talking to one of my colleagues earlier today about how a lot of times in your career, like one thing leads to the next thing, and that thing opens up a door for something else, and you do that, and this idea comes out of that. It's kind of like this trail. It's interesting to kind of hear, starting at carpentry and framing, and then getting to finished carpentry and going from there. How did you know when you got out of? How did you make that jump from being just carpentry and framing into doing more specific finished work? I think you kind of gave an indicator, like, yeah, I used to take too long because
yeah.
that probably also an indication of maybe your strength and gifting that you have.
So going way back, as a nerdy little kid, I put models together, of like old warships and tanks and stuff. And I would just take my time and make them really nice. And I don't know why that was a thing that I was attracted to, but very early on, building things and doing really highly detailed work. I had erector sets too. I don't know if you remember what those were.
Yeah,
Just
totally.
Legos, the whole thing. And so I guess I'm just naturally a more detail-oriented person. And I remember like on a quick, we were just framing up just like a 15 by 15 room addition. And like by day two, the guy was like, "Okay, you're cutting you're cutting rafters and stuff," and handing them up to me because he liked how I was, small pencil marked, accurately laid out and cut. But pretty quickly, I realized like you just don't make any money doing that. So since then, really, my framing has been limited to just anything around a project that I'm doing. If I'm building an entertainment center, occasionally I might have to frame just something to build out the wall or whatever. So, but yeah, that I learned early on, and I guess maybe that's kind of the filter of construction. If you're scared of heights, you're probably not going to be a great roofer. And if you tried roofing, you might make it to lunch, you might make it to the end of the week, but at some point you're going to be on a really high roof and you're going to go, "No, this is not for me." That's essentially what happened to me. And so I was sort of sifted down through construction, and I bumped into some finished carpentry jobs, and I was like, "Ooh, this is kind of fun." And we started with some basic stuff, hanging interior doors, which is that's pretty easy work. And then putting up some molding, moving on to crown molding, and then I got to do some built-ins. And as the work got a little more detailed, it became more. It went from just a job where I was earning money to where it was a job and I was earning money, but it was something that I enjoyed. So that's one of the coolest things about the construction industry is there's a little bit of something for everybody. And if you don't like one thing, that doesn't mean you hate construction. You can try something else and see if that's for you.
I think that's awesome. I mean, because very few people in any industry can align those two circles: what I enjoy doing and what I can get paid to do.
Yeah.
That's so how did you you're went out on your own at a certain point. You're working for someone else. When you started your own business, how did you know that you wanted to have your own business and not work for somebody else?
This would have been like the early 2000s ish, I think. And that was the construction like labor market's pretty tough. It does it right now. It's a little better and pays pretty good because there's just nobody who's gone into construction for the last 15 years. Back then, wages were pretty low, and they're not awesome now. But I kind of like was getting paid whatever I was getting paid working for the guy that I was working for, and I was like, if I charged a third of what he charges for my labor, and I booked 10 days a month, I'd be making equal money. So it was sort of a no brainer. So I kind of called up my circle of friends, some of which were homeowners at the time, and I said, "Do you have anything I can come help you with?" And a couple of people said yes. That got me through my first month, and then from there it was just hustle, hustle, hustle. One thing leads to another, and it's built up. And of course, it starts really slow. And I couldn't take that same approach today with a mortgage, a car payment, and two kids. I'm a young guy. My rent was $500 a month, so it was sort of a no brainer. It was an easy step to just say, well, I'll give this a try. What's the worst that can happen? I didn't have the adult responsibilities that, of course, seem to just meander their way into your life.
Sure, dude. Turns out you got to feed those kids. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
it was a really low stress start for me, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. And I think maybe what were some things maybe you underestimated in that process? We talked to a lot of guys here at ConGenius that are they're considering going out on their own. They want to get started, or they're just getting started. What advice would you give somebody maybe who's is developing a good skill set in finished carpentry and thinking about starting their own thing? What advice would you give that person?
I would say do kind of what I did. Take a lay of the land, do the math on it. Say, like if they're currently employed, figure out how much they make, figure out how much you need to make, what's the minimum, figure out how much you need to charge hourly to make that, and then double it at least because stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah, I would start with the math, figure out what you need to make, and then maybe reach out to a few professionals in that industry and see if they'd offer you some time. Um, every area is very different. Finished carpentry pays a lot more in city centers than it does in rural areas. It's just how it works. Um, and I would imagine most of the trades are fairly similar area to area. So you got to figure out, your overhead, what you need to make, and then try and come up with some sort of plan to make that work. Like I said, I mean, I guess, describing my real loose plan. I mean, I did have a plan. I knew how many days a month I needed to book to pay my rent and have some gas and some food and so forth. And then, like I said, calling up those friends was able to get me through the first couple months. So I would do that. I would also have, if you're a professional working, looking to change careers, I would have a couple of months at least of just in case.
Yep.
And then, the more business planning you can be, I'm not the greatest planner on planet Earth, but if you can write out a business plan and then maybe a few sort of, maybe short, medium, and long-term goals for your business so that you know what you're shooting at, I think that would really be a roadmap that could help somebody who's looking to, take a leap.
Yeah. You mentioned a word that a lot of guys have a hard time figuring out. That's overhead. What are things that people should have in their overhead, or maybe things that they miss? Because if it's your first time starting out, like, people don't understand that concept because they've never really had to think about it. For a business owner, what are some things in your world that are overhead items that you've got to financially plan for?
We're going to need some kind of car, a van or a truck or whatever. And even if you own it outright right now, I don't have a car payment. I don't need to make that money or whatever. You still do because the thing's going to break, or it's going to need tires, and or just whatever. So definitely want to plan for a car and plan a lot more. They're getting more expensive. But the flip side of that is the more modern vans are so good. You can put so much stuff in them. And that really should be your first tool. And that would go for an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter, a flooring guy, or anybody. Materials are big and heavy and they need to be transported. Tools need to be organized. So when I first started, I owned just a crummy little Nissan truck, and it was paid off, and that was really something that I didn't consider. And then you're driving all over the place. You spend a ton of money on gas, and so you need to consider that as well. But if you own your car currently and you're getting started, I would say go ahead and start making a car payment anyway, and put that money aside. That's what I do now. And on my most recent van, I had been making like a phantom car payment, and I was able to pay cash for it, which it was used. It was a few years old, but I walked in the dealership and I go, I'll bring in $100 bills if you give me a deal on this thing. And so they cut me a real good price on it. And now I still don't have a car payment, but I'm still making that phantom car payment because now fast forward, it's been 8 years or something that I've owned it,
Yeah.
and I'm going to need another van at some point, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely do that. And then you have to be smart about figure out your cell phone insurance. And every state, county, municipality is going to be different on all those different requirements. And then there's going to be a lot of like ticky tacky stuff of like $25 business license fee and blah, blah, blah. And, a $25 business license fee is probably not going to make or break your business, but there's a ton of those little things. It's just
Yeah.
like, there's just a lot of those little things. And then budget time for that. You're going to have to log on and, re-register your LLC. I have to do that every year. It's $55 in this state. So, and then I always forget my password for the login. And so then it's taking me an hour to do that.
Yeah. I think that's you talk about the time and the effort that goes into that. So how do you then and this might feel like overly like detailed, but I think it's an interesting point that some guys aren't we're trying to help people figure out too. How do you then budget for that? Like, do you look at it for you and your business? Do you look at it for the year and come up with a number that says, hey, I think I need to put aside this many thousands of dollars to cover my overhead? And then do you like spread that over the 12 months? Or how do you plan for that in your pricing? Or do you?
That's a good point. Do I plan that specifically? I have everybody bills differently, and I bill really low per hour, but I'm really generous on the hours that I allot to a job, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So every job that I bid, I always have like a shop cleaning amount of time.
Right.
And things like dust collectors and just sweeping the floor. Is that cleaning out the van? Is that just wrapping up all the cords and putting everything away? Like all that takes time. And I know some guys like to charge more per hour, but then they're not getting paid for that, like organizing their van, for example. So I always have a little bit of that in each bid, and I sort of have like flat fees. And on a bigger job, it's more, but I do have like a minimum of a couple of hours that I would put on. Like even if I was just going over to fix somebody's door, you're going to pay me a couple of hours to do the billing on it, to go to the bank, to just do anything, right?
Yeah.
So I also have like an office um, like allotment of time per job, and it slides a little bit. It might be a half hour for something small, and it might be 8 hours for a larger job, or even more if there's a lot of design work involved. So that's I sort of use that hourly to both get those little goofy business things done, where you have to pay the registration on your truck or whatever. Or re-register your LLC or whatever it is. And so in other words, as I'm sitting in front of the computer doing those goofy things, I am getting paid for that. And my hourly rate I have built in there just kind of, a little bit comes off the top that goes to some of those, more basic
Yeah.
expenses.
You and for those of you who maybe haven't been to your Instagram or YouTube channels to see like the work that you're doing, you do some. I know people just post their highlights normally online and maybe not some of the mundane stuff, but your portfolio is really cool. I mean, and like watching how you do things, like you go through the fine detail, and like it really gives the average viewer, even if you're not a carpentry, an idea of the level of detail and quality that goes into some things. And you've got a pretty high-end cool work that you're doing. It's creative, it's cool. Like I watched that video when you made the bowl, it's like I've never thought about making a bowl before, but watching that was like super informative to me. And your voice, like you've got like that soothing voice, like watching the bowl. It's like man, I just want to make bowls now. How did you as you've kind of grown, and it seems like you do a lot of creative, interesting work that it pushes your creativity. It's challenging as well. How do you balance doing some of the boring jobs maybe that just pay the bills versus getting into the stuff that keeps you intellectually and creatively interested? So I'm assuming there's still some boring work that you do. You're like, I'm just doing this because it pays the bills, but it's not going to make my Instagram channel. Is there a way that you balance doing those two kinds of work?
Yeah, I wish there was. That's not easy. Um, Construction can be really boring if you just hang siding all day. Although I guess maybe on cooler homes or whatever, if you're putting up cedar shingles, it might be really neat. Um, yeah, that's hard. And I try and take on as much creative work as I can, and I try and just mix in the regular stuff in between. I've gone down both paths, if that makes sense, where like I've just gotten in ruts where I'm just doing the same job over and over and over, and I get a little bored. And then I've kind of taken on too much a few times where then things get a little lean because the creative projects are they're always more challenging, at least most of the time. Um, how do I do it? I don't know that there's a good answer. I just try not to go too much, one direction or the other. Um, Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that. Yeah, just try and bounce back and forth a little.
Yeah. And part of it's the practical side of just, paying bills, right? Finding
Yep.
what makes money. I think we talked to a lot of guys who maybe I've talked to a guy recently who's like, yeah, I was kind of in a rut. It's kind of do the same thing over and over again, it was paying the bills, but they found themselves losing some of their inspiration and creativity. If you are in one of those ruts, or maybe you are in a pure, or maybe it's a guy who's they just do, yeah, the crown molding and baseboards over and over again. What's the best way for that guy to learn and to kind of maybe ignite some of the creativity and passion again?
Well, you mentioned the bowl that I did. That was I just took a day in the middle of whatever I was doing at the time. I think I was building a door, a couple doors, and I was just tired of it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to pull the lathe out and just have a little fun today. Um, and that's intentionally realizing and recognizing I'm a little bored right now and I just need to shake it up a little bit. So that's one of the things that I do. I sort of like treat myself a little bit. In terms of developing skills, there's not a lot of like real good formal education for woodworking. So I always kind of like considered that like me putting myself through college. Woodworking is really something that after you get some basic skills, where if you can learn how to operate a table saw safely, or a joiner or a planer, and the basic functions of the tools, you really can teach yourself. You can pick a project off the internet, a nightstand, or whatever it is that you want to do, go buy some materials and give it a go. And what's the worst that can happen? You have a nice bonfire at the end of it. Okay, but you've learned something there. And that's always been my approach is I just try and find something that interests me. And then I go, well, what tools do I need? As long as they're not too expensive, I try and find them used. That's always my approach. Um, and then just give it a go. And I consider that like that time that I spend and then the money that I spend as just part of my formal education. So the other way to learn how to turn a bowl would be to go take a class somewhere where you're gonna have time in that, you're gonna have money in that, and it's gonna take a lot longer because then you have to work on their schedule and so forth. Whereas if you just go buy the stuff and give it a try, I mean, maybe the first one's terrible, give it a go again.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a bit of like a self teacher, and I really enjoy that. That like might be the thing that I like most about woodworking is even after 20 something years of doing this, there's still like I've never carved like like something three-dimensional, or even something like an old federal furniture. I've never done any of those types of carvings. One of the other ones that I want to learn, I got a book in my Amazon cart right now, is how to letter carve. So I don't even know why. What would I even do with that? I have no idea, but yeah, I think it would just be really fun to try.
Yeah.
And so I would really encourage anybody, if you have the basic skills and you can use tools safely, just pick something and give it a go. Pick something. Don't go nuts. Don't go buy $10,000 of mahogany and build a Chippendale, sideboard or whatever. Like, okay, maybe go in a little slower than that. But I just encourage people to kind of jump in.
I like that. I think, and you did actually have a formal education, right? I think I read your website, like you did go and get a formal education in woodworking. Was that really just to get you out the door and started, or is that something that you were doing woodworking carpentry, went back for more education?
Yeah, so I took some classes at a Palomar Community College in California,
Mhm.
and it was a community college format, so typically like 2 hours or an hour and a half, 2 days a week, and for a semester at a time. And I probably ended up taking maybe 10 or 12 classes, and I took one that was 2 semesters. That was cabinet making. I took two furniture making classes, a chair making class, and a handful of others. And I think the thing that that did for me was it helped me get over like my fear. And and really it was the fear of like not knowing and not being good enough. And after taking those classes, it really built my confidence. And sure, I did learn a ton of skills, and I think those skills help with confidence. But after taking those classes, I was very confident using all manner of tools and how to sharpen things and how to produce good work. And at that point, even after just a couple of classes, I think I took one or two. By the end of those classes, I was like, okay, yeah, I really think I can do this. So leading up to that, I had been working in construction, like kind of interior remodel, some finished carpentry, but more basic stuff. And then again, that need to learn more and develop more skills drew me to that. And pretty quickly, just a couple of classes, I would definitely recommend if you have access to that. It'll really, really help with confidence, and then you'll feel as though you can tackle a more complex project and keep taking those steps forward.
In your business today, do you have employees or are you a one man show?
I sub out some stuff like finishing work occasionally, but that's it. I have no employees otherwise, and I mean, I pay a bookkeeper and a lot of
Right.
that kind of stuff. I do change my own oil though because I can just do it faster than driving all the way over and back. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I sub out the things that I can as much as I can, and that sort of helps prevent me from having to hire an employee. Right now, I could definitely use one, especially on the YouTube side for like editing, camera work, and just like buying stuff, like getting materials for a project or whatever. But I have had a couple employees in the past, and I'm not a very good manager. Um, that's just a skill that I just don't have. I'm just kind of a quiet person, and my expectations are pretty high. And you're just probably not; those expectations are typically not going to be met by some hourly person that
Right.
I'm paying to just show up. And that's been kind of a thing for me. I do like working alone. I really like working alone. It puts a ceiling on me, which is a little lower than I would like it to be. But my days are a little bit better, a lot less stress, and then I get to focus on actual building, not managing.
Yeah.
So it keeps me as the craftsman versus the manager, which I like. And I realize, everybody's got different goals. Some people want to have a huge crew of dudes, and that's cool. I get it. For me though, I just want to be the craftsman. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. Last week I interviewed someone in California he employs 68 carpenters, and
Oh,
he's alive. Like he loves doing it. He's got like 14 project managers and like this whole huge, and they live in it. LA. And it was interesting because like for him, like it was clear like that's where he comes alive and like he's incredible at doing it. But I think it's interesting, like your perspective, because there's a lot of people out there that are somewhere in between those two. There's like, well, should I grow this business and hire employees, or can I find a way to be happy and fulfilled doing it by myself? I think you mentioned, like enjoying working alone and maintaining that standard. And a lot of people, that's what stops them from adding people on. It's like, hey, I've got a standard I want, and I don't, know if I can keep someone else doing that. How have you? Is there a way that that you've had to, how did you come to that realization, I suppose? Because I think it's important, my opinion is I think people should figure out how you're wired, who you are. And similar to like finding which niche you want to be in, and hey, I'm more detailed, I'm afraid of heights, that sort of thing. Was there anywhere in there where you just kind of realized like, you know what, I just don't like managing people?
yeah, I mean, it's like the second day or maybe before lunch when you're standing on the roof and you realize you don't like height. It was pretty quick. I was just like, I don't like just having to hover over somebody, and I found it very annoying. just a lot of hand holding. And this was a person and I've had a couple of different people. And yeah, I just don't like the hand holding, and I don't like breaking the bad news. I don't, I just yeah, I'm just not that person. I can sit at a workbench and work quietly for 8 or 10 hours a day, and the time just melts away, and I'm in my zone, and I love it. But when that keeps getting broken up by questions, and then you hear a kickback or something on the table saw, you're like, oh, and it just turned it into a very stressful situation.
Yeah.
It turned something that was very fun and meditative into something that was very stressful for me, and I didn't like that at all. Um, and yeah, I first when I first opened my business, I was like, yeah, I'll work for alone for a little bit, and then I'll get a crew of guys, and I'll start making a ton of money. And I honestly, I had that look in the mirror one day of like, Mike, you're not a very good manager of people. You need to like recognize that about yourself. Like you either need to hire somebody to manage everyone, and build a business that way, or you need to figure out how to make it work. And really, like for me, one of the things about my business that I'm most proud of is that I've figured out how to make this work as a one-man band. I've kept my
Mhm.
overhead very low. And I mean, it might not look it when you look at my shop on YouTube or whatever, but that's 20 years of building to get there. And I bought, fixed up and sold homes, and worked very hard. Those like the tools that I have sitting in my shop didn't just get there all on one credit card swipe. Like that's again 20 years of collecting and selling and trading, and refurbishing tools that I otherwise couldn't afford. I buy them used, they're broken, I fix them up, and now I've got a great tool. So yeah, I really assessed my own like kind of skills, and the one thing I can do is I can build anything. If you give me some dimensions and or a space to measure or whatever, I can build you anything you want. But I cannot manage people. So coming to that realization, that really helped channel my business. And I think I'm better for it. Who knows? I don't know. It's easy
Yeah.
to look back and question, but it has been fun, and I still do enjoy building. All the other gobbledygook I don't like, but
Yeah.
um,
I
I
think it's
still, at the end of the day, I love building stuff.
at that realization and figuring out, how you define success for yourself and know that, your finish line and your definition of success is going to look different than the next guy. And maybe for that guy having 15 employees and the crew and that whole thing, like that's what he should be doing because that's what he's great at. But being able to look at that and be like, that's not my race to run. Like that's that guy. I'm going to be me and finding that place where you're comfortable and happy and successful and at peace doing it. For the person who maybe identifies with kind of what you're saying, like, yeah, man, like I feel like maybe I should hire employees, but that thought of that makes me want to, barf a little bit, like, and I just want to be successful by myself. What are things you've learned maybe the hard way for that person who's a one-man show and they think they've got to grow employees to be successful? What are things you've done to be a one-person unit that have been helpful for you?
Yeah, the first thing would be to just make sure you're okay with the pay. If you're billing people, that's going to hit a ceiling. And I mean, the only way to make more money is either raise your hourly rate or to work more. And you can do both. There's options for that. But in reality, you're you're a person who builds something, and you're just going to make that amount of money. When you run a crew of 68 carpenters or whatever, you're technically not really a carpenter. You're just a manager. And that could be a manager at the Amazon fulfillment center north of here, or it could be that you're managing carpenters. But ultimately, what you're doing there is managing. So you need to realize that essentially labor, you have an upper end of what you could make. And I realized that pretty quickly. And you know, um, eh, carpenters around here, they can only charge so much. Um, so I realized that, and I decided that my approach would be to keep my overhead really low. I've never rented a shop. It's always been like either in my basement or on my property or whatever. And um, no expensive trucks, the $95,000 F-350 4x4 diesel or whatever, that's out. That's a $1,500 a month car payment. That's a waste of money. Do not do that. And then from there, just kind of look around at your life and just find the important things. I own a couple motorcycles. I'm really lucky, but I don't buy new Ducatis. I buy 5, 8-year-old used bikes for $4,000. Um, So yeah, I've just kept my overhead low, and then I've kept my expectations in check with what's realistic for the marketplace that I'm in, and I think I'm happier for it. It's real easy to like start a construct, especially when times are good, to start a construction business and you can just sell, 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 and then figure out how to produce everything, and you're just chasing money. And if you want to do that, I get it. I totally get it. But that's a business unto itself. If you want to be a craftsman, I think that there is room for people as long as you're smart, as long as you're frugal and realistic. You can really set up a great lifestyle. And if I mean, I think I win the lifestyle battle on that. I mean, I work from home, drop the kids off in the morning. I walk out to the shop. I work. I'm occasionally on site, maybe 1 to 4 days a month. I'm out doing an install. I do have a couple of people that I call on for installs. So, like if I'm delivering something heavy, I have another buddy who's a contractor, and we kind of share, labor rates. Like if he's getting a delivery of tile or something and needs to unload it, like I'll go help him. He'll help me on entry door installation day.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's really I've just sort of over the years I've just kind of refined the process of being a one man band, and I've got it down pretty good, and
Yeah.
it's flowing pretty well for me, and I like that.
If you talked about pricing, and figuring out like, your rates and those things, you've gotten much more skilled over the last, 5 to 10 years. Like, have you also had to change your pricing? And
Yeah,
what are maybe some things you learned about how to accurately price jobs that you're doing?
that's the question. So I get 8,000 emails a day from viewers who are like, "Oh, I want to be a carpenter, um, and my neighbor wants me to build X for him. What should I charge?" And that's like the impossible question. Everybody's setup is different. Everybody is different. Every market is different. Materials can vary greatly from market to market. Um, I always just suggest like sit down and write out the 27 steps that you think it's going to take to do this project, whatever it is. And even if you're wrong, even if you miss 8 steps, just write out everything you could think of, and then just write down a number next to it. 30 minutes, 2 hours, one day, whatever it is, and then figure out some reasonable number, per hour that you want to make. And if you say, well, I want to take home 25 bucks an hour, okay, fine, double that because you're going to have overhead and blah, blah, blah. And then multiply all that up. And the materials, you should be able to nail the materials pretty good. You should be able to call up your supplier and say, what is 8 sheets of A1 maple cost or whatever? And they're going to say it's 118 a sheet. Add that all up. Remember sales tax. Um, and then, put in an hour or two to go pick up materials on that list, and multiply that out and give that number to the client and just do the job. Take careful notes of how long it takes you to do it, because you're not going to be right. You're going to be very wrong. But that first job is that college education on how to price your work, not somebody else's work. You can't call up some other guy who's got $1 million CNC and he says it takes me 5 minutes to cut a 30-sheet kitchen. How long does it take you to cut it? And take careful notes in that first job, and then adjust accordingly. And obviously there's kind of upper and lower bounds. You definitely don't want to be too low, and you definitely don't want to be too high. So after the first couple of jobs, you want to adjust quality levels, you want to adjust processes, you want to improve where you can improve to become more efficient. It took me maybe 8 or 10 jobs. And I'm not counting the like, I need somebody to come like rehang my door kind of jobs. I mean, like actual real projects. It took me maybe 8 or 10 to get it down to where I'm pretty confident. And now I can look at something and in 20 minutes of just taking some notes, I can get real close to where I need to be. And then over time, obviously, prices are going up. You got to raise your rates. As your skills go up, you need to raise your rates. And then you should become more efficient with better tools. And that'll help you make a little bit more money too, although you don't necessarily deliver it to the customer. You just pocket that money, and that's sort of how you're going to get your raises as the years go by. And then fast forward a little bit, and you've now maybe it's 5 years later, or whatever. You have a good solid client base, and you have a body of work that you can show either on a website or in on your phone or a tablet or something. So when you go meet a client, you can say, hey, look at all this awesome stuff that I can build. And that's going to put you in more demand, and they're going to be much more accepting of paying whatever it is that you want to charge for that project, just because you're established and you have that body of work. And at that point, you should be making quite a bit more than where you started, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And that's through efficiencies, and then also through charging more.
What do you say? Because someone who's in your space, who's now you have that portfolio, I can go to your website and I can see the quality of what you do. I know you've done it before. You're not someone who's just going to figure it out on my project. Like you know what you're doing. Um, what do you say to the customer that tries to that's not willing to pay that price or tries to negotiate on pricing?
I don't. I would just tell them to have a very lovely day, and I wish you all the luck in the world. And no, I wouldn't do that. It's just funny. Why do some industries tolerate that and others don't? Like, I just don't get it. There's some weird thing about used cars. Like, why is it we always feel we need to haggle over used cars or whatever? And even I do that, but it's something that's in the industry. It is something that's in the construction industry. It's something that I don't do. If somebody comes to me and says, "Look, this was outside of our budget," I would be more than willing to reconfigure the project to potentially reduce the price, change materials, lessen the scope. Often I will, especially if it's a smaller project, I'll offer a discount if the customer gives me a completely open timeline. So am I going to get this done in 2 weeks or 10 months? I don't know. What that does is it allows me to slide that in between other jobs. When I have downtime, I can come back to this other project and work on it a little bit. So I do offer some discounts, but they make sense for my business. I don't just lower my price out of just because I'm a neat, nice, nice man. I just don't do that. Um, I don't think it. I think in the long run, if you're really hungry and you had to do it, okay, fine. But in the long run, I would recommend that everyone stay away from that as much as possible. That doesn't mean be stupid about it. Like I said, I do have my ways of adjusting, but don't just lower your price because the customer's being persuasive.
Yeah, I think we run into that. We've talked to a lot of some of our users, and they're like, "Well, I'm getting as much work as I'm successful because I'm busy, or I'm getting as much work as I can handle, so I'm winning." And the question comes in like, "Well, are you profitable on that job or not?" It's like, "I don't know, but I'm busy." Is there anything that you would? Because basically, we're saying is if you negotiate too much or open that door, you might end up working for free. You might be
Yeah,
losing money on a job and not know
yeah,
it. Do you have any horror stories of times you lost money on accident?
yeah. So it just reminded me one of the teachers at the Palomar College of Woodworking where I took classes. He goes, "I don't need practice, man. Like I need to." So this guy taught a class or two, but then also had a cabinet making business that he did full time. And one of the people in the class asked the same question, like, "How do you deal with clients who want a lower price?" And he just goes, and this guy had a particularly like he sort of smile at you and then kind of dig at you at the same time, if you know what I mean. He goes, "You know what I
Yeah,
tell the customers? I don't need practice."
yeah,
Which is just a way of saying I don't want to do it for any less than this bid. And if you want to have someone else do it, go ahead. Um, but back to the question, which was horror stories. Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of jobs up front where I was like, boy, I did not make very much money on that one, but I had worked for a few people and a couple of the guys. So I worked for kind of just two contractors that were finished carpenters, a couple years with each. And one of them was very smart and very good at business. And he was probably too open with me about stuff. So I really hit the ground running. That actually might be another little tip. And if somebody wanted to get into the industry, I would say find somebody really smart and try and go work for them and buddy up to them. If in some states you need to get a contractor's license, all those different things. And sometimes you need to have work experience to get the contractor's license. Maybe work for the guy for a month or two. If you like them, sit them down and go, "Here's what I want. I want you to sign my work experience. So I'm going to work for you for 2 years or whatever happens to be for your state." And explain that's what I want out of this deal. And what you're going to get is me, and I'm going to kick as much rear end as possible for your business. And, a lot of that's essentially what I did when I was getting started. And as such, I just got a lot of the back end on it. So I hit the ground running pretty good. Even still, even with that, it took me a handful of jobs to get to a place where I was like making what I wanted to make, with most of my projects. As far as horror stories, um, I had a couple around the pandemic, and I really don't like coming back on clients. But two by fours went in my area from $3.29 to $11 a two by four. $11. And hardwoods didn't go up quite that much, and plywood didn't either. But I had one where, recently, I want to say materials were like 800 more bucks. And I went back to the client and I was like, I'll make you a deal. I'll split that with you. So what ended up happening was I gave him a bid in 2019 or something like that. And keep in mind, I usually have 6 months to 12 months of backlog. And then, fast forward all the wacky stuff that had happened. And then I called back up the supplier when I was getting ready to start the job. And I was like, wait, how much is walnut plywood right now? You're telling me what? So yeah, I got caught out on that. That was kind of and sort of foolish on my part. I probably should put a little line item in there of like, if materials go way up in price, like we're going to have to sit down and have a chat. I'll say this though. I interview the client as much as I'm sure the client is interviewing me, and people who I get a kind of a bad feeling for, I will typically just say, oh, I'm kind of busy. Sorry. Like, have a good one. And actually that's one of the benefits of being a smaller shop is I can be more selective over who I work for. So I say all that to say that I am selective over my clients, and the people who I've just been so lucky. You kind of fall in with one person and they tell their friend. And if they're a good client, typically all of their friends are just going to be just as cool as they are. And, I've sort of been passed around streets, where, you work for house 29 and then you're working for house 39 and then you're, for 64 and you end up just sort of like going, down and around the cul-de-sac. And oftentimes, you just fall in with a group of people, and typically, if the first one you fall in with is a nice, good person who's willing to tackle challenges of a project and so forth, their friends will also be. And so, in that vein, problems typically aren't too big of problems if the client is a good client.
What are some yellow flags or red flags that come up when you're in that interviewing process where they're talking to you and you're talking to them? What are things that stick out to you that are like indicators that maybe I don't want this person as a customer?
The two for me is chipping you on price. Like, oh, why does that cost that much? It's just sides, top and bottom and a back. Cabinets are easy, man. Okay. That's one. And then the other one is when they start like really grinding on timeline. As a one-man band, I cannot just churn out work. And if I get sick and fall behind, there's nobody there to sort of take up that slack. And I got two young kids. I'm sick every 10 minutes because they bring home all their wacky little fluids and grossness. And so you end up falling behind. So timeline is one where I typically will have that conversation with the clients as well. And if they reject my offer because I can't like absolutely guarantee a tight timeline, okay, I get it. That's fine. Like if they're remodeling their whole house and countertops are coming in and the flooring guys want to start on the 14th or whatever, maybe you're a good guy and maybe I'm a good guy or whatever, but it's just not going to kind of mesh. So, the flexibility on the timeline, and that, maybe they're a good person, but maybe they're not a good person. Maybe they're a bad person, but, that's kind of a yellow flag for me. At least maybe we should sit down and chit chat about what timeline means and what it means to hire me. And, but then the flip side of that is I say, well, go ahead and hire me. I'm going to make you the most awesome kitchen you've ever seen in your entire life. And it's going to be glorious and the whole thing. So, pros and cons.
Yeah.
Other red flags, I don't know, maybe overly messy, people who are overly busy. I've had some clients who travel for work, and that ends up being like a real problem. They're just gone all the time. Like, hey, when can I come to install X? And it's like, oh, well, I'm out of town. I'm doing this or whatever. And that so a client's schedule can be a challenge. If they have kids, it could be a challenge too. You need to at least think about that. Like if there's going to be dangerous things around, like if it's a stay-at-home parent and you're going to be firing nails, okay, we need to talk about nap time. We need to talk about
Right.
the disruption to your life that this project's going to be. And they're either going to be okay with it or they're not. But that's definitely one dimension. I just finished a couple months ago, kind of a little interior finish carpentry project for some clients. And this was a really nice lady. She had 3 kids. And it was like a zoo in that house. And I had to like put chairs around to just keep the kids from like running, where I have a little compressor set up and I've got tools and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, if that kid, just comes in, trips over something, for crying out loud, and hits their head. So yeah, those are a couple little things. And none of them are like total showstoppers, but you definitely need to consider
Yeah.
who these people are and how to best, meet the challenges of their project.
I think too, like just the expectations up front, like you said, of like, hey, I'm going to destroy your house for 3 weeks or whatever the thing is. And
Yeah.
like, are they ready? Do they really know what that's going to look like and what's going to
Yeah.
entail? I got little kids at home too. And it's like, yeah, it's like, you gotta, yeah, it could be a challenge. So yes, I'm just setting those expectations. So that conversation is way easier to have before you sign a contract than in the middle of the job.
Yeah, when she's like, "Why is everything dusty?" And I'm like, "Well, because I'm cutting stuff and I'm coated in it too."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just part of it. Like, I'll do my level best to clean up, but there has to be, the expectation doesn't need to be set accordingly up front. And again, for the most part, nice people are really cool and they're happy to have you there and they're excited to have the project completed. And um, that is one little benefit of having a shop, where I can really build all the assemblies in my shop, keep all the mess and the noise and the nightmare, and then take those assemblies and go install them in someone's house. That does help a little bit versus unpacking in somebody's driveway and breaking out the job site table saw and making cuts. Sometimes you have to do that. That's fine, but yeah, if you can rent a place or buy a place with a little garage, at least, you'd be surprised the amount of work you can get done, and
Yeah.
that ends up providing a better customer experience.
And there's less time driving back and forth between the site potentially,
Yeah.
One last kind of subject touch on is I got to talk about the YouTube thing. So did you intend to? I think I checked. You have over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is pretty awesome. How did you get into the YouTube channel, and did you have any idea that it would get that popular?
No, talking about getting sick. I get really sick. My kid got me sick. And so I was laying on the couch one day and I just didn't want to watch anything, on TV or whatever. So I clicked on YouTube and I started watching some carpentry videos. And this was like 7 years ago. And I don't remember even, you just sort of, how YouTube is, you just fall into the hole and you just click buttons and
Yeah.
watch things. And I was watching somebody and they said, and I make money on this. And I said, wait a second, you do what? And so I did a little bit of digging and I was like, wait a minute, you actually can make money making YouTube videos? And I said, well, okay, let's see if I can give it a try. And my goal was, it was sort of like a tiered goal. My first goal was I just put out some videos, and if nothing else, I can use those videos to demonstrate, my level of craftsmanship to my clients. And I sort of had the idea that I would do 10 videos. I thought that might be a wide enough variety of videos to where I could guide clients, say, hey, look at this one, send me a link or whatever. And I was just going to use it as a marketing tool. And then, by maybe video 4 or 5, it was getting enough views to where I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was making, a few dollars a day. I was like, well, okay, this is cool. So I did a couple more. And then by the time I was at my 10th one, I was, making a little bit of money anyway, enough where it was worth sitting down and editing the videos. And then it kind of grew from there. And I'm still not at a point where I can just produce a video and it just makes me enough money. It's just part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For those listening, YouTube does a revenue split where when they run ads during the video, that's split between YouTube and the creator. And it's one thing when you're doing a client job and the client's paid for the materials and you're getting paid hourly to build it, and then the YouTube stuff is extra. It's a totally different game when you have like this creative idea. No one is going to buy it. You have to self-fund it and then make a video on that. The video needs to do really well. Like, you would need to get at least 500,000 views to make that video just make you any sort of money. And of course, that would depend on the cost of materials. So it's an interesting proposition, and I know there are a ton of people, and it's so annoying, who run like the Squarespace ads or whatever, and those pay good. They're very annoying to book. I get occasionally somebody will reach out to me and say, "Hey, we want you to run a spot," and I just tell them no because I want some number. What I think my well, there's a giant chasm between what they want to pay me and what I think it's worth. So I just basically don't run those. So yeah, I would suggest this: if you are a carpenter and you do decent work, and I would suggest you put on a clean shirt and shave yourself up, or just make your look good, and then film your projects and show them to your clients. Put them out there. It can be a little intimidating, and people can say really mean things about your work, which they'll do. But get over that, because if nothing else happens, it is a very good marketing tool. And if you happen to be a compelling person and your channel takes off, well, then that's great. Then it's going to be another source of income, and congratulations. But I remember like kind of getting started way back in the day when I was getting interested in, do I want to, be a craftsperson? And this was like when the internet was getting started, and there was like three people on the entire internet who were carpenters who also had websites. And I remember just like reading those websites 50 times over. Like I was obsessed. And then slowly the website started getting better. They went from like all to one crummy picture and all text to more and more pictures. And then now fast forward all these years later, and it's like, if you don't have a website with really good pictures, you're behind the times. And I might even argue that in 2023, if you don't have some form of video showing your personality, I think you might just be behind the curve in terms of marketing. So I would definitely get something where like you're looking at a camera and talking to a potential client, and try and sound nice or funny or whatever your angle is. But people want to know who you are, and people hire me for me, not, sure, I can do good work, but um, I think it's a combination of like personality and work. And if you can present that well to a customer, it does make, closing that deal pretty easy, because they like you. They want to work with you. And you can do that with a video if you post that up on your website. So and then all the other social media, blah, 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 you got to do that too.
Yeah. I would think, especially in this line of work where you can show your work, like, pictures worth 1,000 words, whatever, people can actually look and see what you've done. So even if
Yep.
it's just, and man, we talk with so many contractors who are, 5 or less employees, and they maybe have a Facebook page that hasn't been updated in 6 months, but certainly not Instagram or any of these other things. I think what we hear from a lot of guys who are successful and doing well, it's like, it's worth the work. Snap pictures,
Yep.
at least before and afters, even remodel work or whatever. This is what it looked like. This is what it looked like after, and giving people a vision for what you can accomplish.
I couldn't agree more. And when times are good, it's so easy to let little things like marketing slide. When you're booked for months with good projects, it's really easy to go, no, I don't need to take pictures of that. I don't need to post on social media. I don't need to update my website. And in my opinion, nothing could be further from the truth, especially when things slip a little bit. Construction is feast and famine. We've had 10 years of up. At some point, things are going to slip a little bit. And that's when you're going to need to be more on your game, in terms of overhead, keep your overhead low, like I said. But if you've updated your marketing, you're going to have that larger body of work. It's going to be more impressive. And when things get more competitive, you're going to stand out a little bit. And those little things, like just having the video, hold the camera smooth, don't make it real shaky, like make a good video. But people really like to see that, and that's how they're going to make a choice. Especially if their goal is to hire a craftsperson. If you're hiring a concrete crew, that it might be a little different. But I'm just speaking from my experience, and a lot of it is personality driven. And I don't think that they're looking for a comedian, but they want to see somebody talking who is passionate about whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that inspires people to make that decision. And again, when times are good, you don't need to do any of that. The phone just rings off the hook and you book jobs and the whole thing. It's when times get a little tougher, if you've positioned yourself, you're going to do better.
I think that's very, very well said. And I mean, you're trying to build trust. You're going to be in their home,
Trust.
working on their home in a place they're going to live, and they're going to give you a sizable amount of money. Like, there's got to be a lot of trust there.
Trust is a very good, I should have just said that. Just trust. You're developing trust.
Easy. All right. Well, hey, we're running on time. If someone wants to find you, what's the plug for how someone can find Mike Farrington?
Just my website's MikeFarrington.com. And if you go on YouTube and search Mike Farrington, you'll find me there. On Instagram, Mike___ Farrington, because somebody stole the other one, the single underscore. Somebody else stole that. And so I stuck it back to them and I put 2 underscores there. Ha, I'll teach you. So yeah, I use Instagram as a bit of a dumping ground. I just kind of post pictures on it. But I do always interact. One of the things the commitments that I made when I decided to move into social media was I was going to interact as much as I can. So any questions that people post on my YouTube videos, I don't get to them in like 10 minutes, like give me a few days, but I try and answer every single question, especially if it's a nice, legitimate question. And that's critical or otherwise. I always want constructive criticism. And then same with Instagram. If you post something that's a question, I will always respond. I think that's something that a lot of other creators are missing, in my opinion, is that interaction. So feel free to reach out. MikeFarrington.com, Mike Farrington on YouTube. I think it probably, if you just Googled my name, you'd probably get some other interesting stuff too. So
yeah,
that's how to find me.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your time. I mean, looking at your work, it's truly impressive, the work that you do and the creativity and the passion and like the craftsmanship of the whole thing. And then watching your videos, the just level of detail and passion that's clearly there. It's been really cool. And watching your videos too, I can tell you love what you do, and that you take a lot of pride in it. And it's I think that's something that is finding something that you love to do, that you're happy doing, that you can also get paid to do. It's quite elusive for a lot of people. It's really cool to sit down and talk to someone who's found that and found peace in the process. So
yeah, and I mean it'd be a whole nother podcast, but obviously it's times have been tough, times have been good, but looking back, it has been a blast. And even to this day, I still love building things, and I'm glad to hear you say that shows through the videos. Because if nothing else, maybe I'm not the greatest teacher or video maker or whatever, but the one thing I am passionate about building stuff, and that if nothing else is conveyed, but that I would say, then that's a successful video.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Mike.
It's an honor to be asked to be on your podcast, and it was a fun chat for sure.